Keep it in the ground, let's keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground, let's keep it in the ground. Keep it in the ground.
Last week, climate activists gathered outside the European Commission in Brussels to protest against fossil gas and nuclear energy being included in the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy. That piece of legislation is designed for investors to get rid of so-called greenwashing by telling them what activities are good for the environment and what activities will help transition to a sustainable environment. In the recent leaked draft of the list of investments, fossil gas and nuclear energy were labelled as transitional. But while the industry for nuclear and gas says that that is actually needed to get to renewable energy, climate activists are arguing against this and want both taken out of the taxonomy. I spoke to Luisa Neubauer, an organiser of Germany's Fridays for Future movement, and Dominika Lasota, a Fridays for Future coordinator from Poland, about the issue. So you were outside the European Commission last week protesting against the inclusion of nuclear energy and fossil gas in the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy. Why do you think they should be taken out?
Well, we are, in the year 2022 right now, emissions globally are rising, yet we are in that very decisive decade where we need to figure out a way to actually more than half them very, very, very soon. And this won't happen as long as fossil fuels are subsidized, as long as new fossil fuel projects are being promoted in the way they are. And clearly, a EU labeling fossil gas as sustainable is not part of the solution toolbox here.
So currently the debate in the European Union is, especially in regards to the taxonomy, is about those transitional fuels. Many of the representatives of the EU deem and call fossil gas and nuclear the transitional fuels. But what we as Fridays for Future are calling out and what we object is the fact that in a taxonomy that is supposed to be, allowing and deciding on what are the sustainable activities that will lead us to the European Green New Deal, we object for the inclusion of the fossil fuels and for the nuclear energy because those are not transitional fuels according to what we stand for and to what science says, because those transitional fuels may lead us to some kind of other deal, but they will also lead us into a deeper climate crisis to which we object and we fight against.
And why are you against the inclusion of nuclear as well?
Well, I mean, we're looking at a framework that's supposed to prevent greenwashing here. That is a very, very meaningful and important step to go, but it won't work as long as the EU itself then greenwashes the whole framework. And we do know for a fact that neither fossil gas nor nuclear are for a fact sustainable. That's just not working out. And we're also seeing, of course, geopolitical interest behind it. So it does on a political level, it makes sense what's happening. We're seeing how the nuclear power lobbies and industries, especially in France, where President Macron is about to go into election, will majorly profit from that taxonomy. And on the other side, we see a German interest in fossil gas here. Yet to make the EU and the world community, all people on the front lines and young generations pay for German and French opportunism in this particular moment, that's just absurd.
And some governments and industries are saying that fossil gas and nuclear energy are needed as a transition rather than sustainable, but as a transitional investment for some time while Europe moves to renewable energies. What's your response to that?
Well, I can speak from the Polish perspective, and what I currently see happening is that the Polish government is very happy about this inclusion of the fossil gas, of the nuclear, because they use these fuels as as a way to publicly say that, okay, we are taking climate action, we are doing some green transition because this is what the EU allows us to do, but then they essentially do not actually conduct a clean transition, a just transition away from coal and towards the clean energy sources, but they postponed the necessary action to later date. We now have a very heated debate over the nuclear energy here in Poland, but what the government is doing is, is that they promise that this will be built, that this energy investments will be implemented, and these are the solutions to the climate crisis. But with the nuclear, we are talking about years from now, and the actions needed is now. We need actions right now, and the solutions to be put in place right now, here, today. And the taxonomy in the current shape isn't offering us this urgency and this serious treatment of the crisis that we are actually in.
Well, there are different dimensions here to that. First of all, we are in a climate emergency that was caused by fossil fuels, and now getting away from one fossil fuels and entering another fossil fuel and calling that a good step, that can only come from someone who has clearly not understood the task here. Then you may have a discussion about how to get from coal-powered economies to renewable-powered economies. Yet as soon as you involve fossil gas in this, and in some parts at least nuclear energy, this is not a sustainable transition anymore. Maybe on some level you can call this, on a technical level, you can call this a transition, but then don't label it sustainable. And after all, we need to get into renewables. Every euro that is invested today in nuclear energy, but more importantly in fossil gas, is a euro that is locked in a fossil energy, while we need every single money we can possibly gather to actually power economies by renewables. And we do know for a fact, given Germany, for instance, that any gas infrastructure that is built today needs to run for several decades to make an economic point, to win an economic argument. Yet that exceeds by far the time we still have left to get out of all fossil fuels. So from beginning to end, it doesn't make sense. And geopolitical interests, lobby and industry interests, as well as some clearly misunderstood science here, is mixed up. And what we get now is that taxonomy that we really need to prevent.
And if you look ahead to the energy mix of the future, would you see fossil gas or nuclear energy as part of that?
Well, I do believe that we can end the era of such destructive fossil fuels and such destructive energy sources. We have a tremendous field of opportunities when it comes to clean energy, because the cleaner energy, when it comes to even the economics of it, it is the cheapest energy available, it is the cleanest energy available. And also what it does is that it offers us the opportunity to shift from this centralized, very heavy industrial energy system to a more democratic one, to a system that is based on communities' participation, on kind of collective well-being. And it's a completely different model, not only for when it comes to energy, but also when it comes to just general the way our societies work. So I don't see a future in fossil fuels. I see the end of fossil fuel era, and my hopes are that we can, as a European society, as a Polish society, of course, as well, to really see and unveil those huge opportunities that lay in just clean energy transition.
And you mentioned the transition away from coal. Germany, of course, is pledging to burn coal for quite a while longer. Nuclear is nearly zero emissions. Do you think that Germany should prioritize phasing out coal or nuclear as it's currently doing?
That's absolutely not a question that's on the table in Germany, given that we can phase out both coal and nuclear power, and enter the renewable age. And I wouldn't know what should be stopping us from that, except interest of those who have clearly, not understood yet that climate emergency really means climate emergency. And just, on the side of nuclear energy, it's weird that you would risk one high risk technology, you would swap one high risk technology, coal, for another high risk technology. And maybe those risks aren't quite the same, yet the risk attached to nuclear energy, I mean, people have experienced that. Most people alive today have very much experienced it, especially, in the Western world. So it's very much a discourse that's upside down. We do know that the costs attached to nuclear energy are, in a different galaxy. We do see that right now, even those countries like Poland who are talking and investing in new nuclear power facilities can't find the money nor the insurance for that for a reason. And by the end of the day, there's still the open question with nuclear waste. So I really don't know what we're talking here about.
And some countries like Austria and Luxembourg have been very vocal about excluding nuclear energy from the taxonomy. Austria has threatened to sue. Why do you think Germany has kept quiet in this debate?
I mean, it's obvious. In Germany, we're currently governed by a new government that wasn't shy about promoting its climate ambitions and putting, climate chancellor placard boards up on the streets during the election, yet has a clear taste for fossil energies. And after we really forced them, so the climate movement really forced the new government to commit to an earlier coal exit and to commit to not destroy many more villages to extend coal mines, we are still stuck with a government that has jumped from coal to gas when it comes to protecting energies that distract livelihoods. And I mean, here, most importantly, of course, we have the Social Democrats, so the party of our Chancellor Scholz, that has been that hasn't found a way yet to say, or to commit to actually phasing out all fossil fuels. And so there's a clear interest in protecting, the remaining fossil fuels that are in the debate, so namely gas. And of course, right now we have two geopolitical playgrounds that are our government is really involved in. There's one, the taxonomy, where fossil gas is promoted, but on the other side, we're looking at the Nord Stream 2 debate, where we also see that our chancellor is currently hiding behind some completely it's hiding from saying that, of course, Nord Stream 2 isn't a project that we can engage in any longer, not just because of its ecological implications, but because Russia is about to do awful things in the Eastern European borders. And it is very much time for Germany to become straight with its economic and peace interests here.
And we've had the EU climate law, we've had COP26 and the Fit for 55 climate package. Do you think Europe is now in a good place when it comes to tackling climate change, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't know why we were in a good place. Emissions are out and about. Our emission scenarios are nowhere near what has been promised in endless summits and big political moments. And instead, there's an ongoing investment in fossil infrastructure. And just as we speak, France is still excited about building the largest heated oil pipeline in the world in Uganda and Tanzania, which is yet another fossil project that is that of course doesn't fit the time we're living in anymore at all, and will destruct ecosystems, species, and livelihoods of the people as well as climate. So I mean, no, neither individual governments and their project nor the EU as a whole currently goes beyond big commitments, big targets, big speeches, which are most often immediately broken by the reality of politics. And just today, looking at the taxonomy that's about to include fossil gas if everything goes wrong, looking at the currently or at the recently negotiated agriculture reform, looking at the negotiations at the COP climate conference, they of course don't add up to the nice speeches and words given by Ursula von der Leyen and other high-profile politicians about the climate emergency and the climate ambitions.
And Poland has also been highly critical of the European Green Deal. A spokesperson for the government last week said that Warsaw aims to build a coalition of countries to oppose some of the solutions put forward in the Fit for 55 climate package. Are you worried about this kind of narrative in Poland, and what impact do you think that could have on the rest of Europe?
To be honest, it is, to me, it is interesting how this anti-European, anti-Fit for 55 narrative is hijacking the true spirits within the society. Just recently, there was this new research done by More in Common, which actually revealed that over 60% of the Polish society is concerned with the government's inaction towards the climate crisis. So, such a really serious majority of the society views that our government, our politicians do not take the necessary steps to meet this crisis.
And there has been criticism about how the European Commission has gone about handling this piece of legislation, sending it out on New Year's Eve and saying there doesn't need to be a public consultation. How do you view their handling of the process?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting timing, between Christmas. Like, it's a taxonomy that's been prepared for, many, many months. And then, setting a framework that's working between Christmas Day and New Year's Eve, that's a special time. And it kind of reminds me of lots of political decisions that are often made during football World Cups, when everyone is, busy following the soccer rather than the politics. I mean, right now, I feel like it's really important to focus on what's next and to focus that the decision is still not, set in stone, and there are ways to stop it. And all those ways need to be assessed and gone if needed. The transparency behind that and the political decision making, is political planning, of course, is not something that really makes a very good case for the EU as a open, transparent, and democratic space for everyone. And of course, one thing that really struck me is that even the financial advisors that would advise the EU Commission on that very sustainability framework are now going out calling it the greatest greenwash of all times. So there's really a lot to worry about.
Finally, you mentioned Germany has a new coalition government, which now includes the Greens. How do you think this will impact climate policy in Germany and on an EU level?
Well, I'm not sure about that new government yet. It's a very mixed bag, and we're getting mixed signals. And I don't think we live in a time where hoping on some kind of government to magically do the job is reasonable anymore. I'd rather say we live in a time where getting to work ourselves, getting organized ourselves, going out and about ourselves, increasing pressure ourselves, and doing the organizing that needs to be done ourselves. That is, I think, something we should very much bet on and very much focus on. And then eventually governments will follow. And I think it's not up for debate whether we will make that big transition. The big question is, will we make it fast enough and just enough? And that's the task ahead now. And if we want to have any chance for that, we need everyone we can get. And I'm speaking of people here and people power.
And we've had the EU climate law, we've had COP26, we've had Fit for 55. Do you think Europe is now in a good place when it comes to tackling climate change, or do you think that more still needs to be done?
Oh, I do believe that there's just about so much to be done. And, we are speaking about the upcoming Fit for 55 implementations and about all of those climate laws coming into place. But then when you look really into the details of what the European Union is proposing, we are still seeing that there hasn't been this mindset shift happened yet. We see among the solutions being put in place in Fit for 55, biomass burning, which emits also like incredible amounts of emissions and destroys the biodiversity. We see that the targets of emissions reductions aren't high enough to meet the Paris Agreement. And so even the solutions that we are offered are very far from reaching the place that we need to be to meet this crisis. Obviously, the action is being taken because it must be taken. People have been on the streets and millions have been calling for this since decades. And as Fridays for the Future, we've been fighting for this for some years now. So there needs to be a political response, and it is there. But is the answer sufficient? Not yet. But I do believe and I hope that it will become sufficient very, very soon.
Well, thank you for answering our questions, and thank you for joining us.